Welcome back to another episode of The Football Chemist, where we use data to go through football's biggest talking points without boring or confusing you with all that technical jargon. In this video, we'll analyse the key battles ahead of Liverpool's trip to St James's Park this Monday. This includes midfield duels, battles in attack, and how Newcastle can exploit Liverpool's soft underbelly. So where exactly is this game going to be won or lost? Let's get into it. So the first major battle we need to consider is the one in midfield, most specifically between Florian Wirtz and Sandro Tonali, because Liverpool's match against Bournemouth really showed how Wirtz is now the beating heart of their midfield. As you can see here, Wirtz was leading his midfield counterparts in some of the key creative stats. He was well ahead for progressive passes and passes into the final third, and he really made Liverpool tick in that match. And whilst it didn't always come off for him, it was still effective enough to help Liverpool score 4 goals. But there were issues for Wirtz in his Premier League debut, and part of that will just be teething issues into adapting into the Premier League. But there are some causes for concern that Newcastle could exploit. For example, when we look at some of his stats compared to his 365-day average, we can see that he's down on quite a few key stats, only by a little bit, but enough for it to have a significant effect. And this could be due to a lot of reasons. For example, that he is now playing in a higher quality league and a more creative midfield than he was at Bayer Leverkusen, and so he is seeing the ball a bit less than he normally would. It could also show that he's perhaps taking more risks with his passes. As we can see, his pass completion percentage is down, and this could be a sign that he's trying more passes, he's trying more ambitious passes, and they're just not quite coming off yet. His influence in attack is further evidence when you consider that he actually got further forward than Hugo Ekitike in the match against Bournemouth on average, and so Wirtz is very much now part of Liverpool's attack. But if Wirtz is so influential in Liverpool's attack, how can Newcastle stop him? Well, I think Sandro Tonali will have to drop back a bit in this match to lend a helping hand to his defence, and he's more than capable of doing this. So we've seen over the course of the past season that Newcastle's midfield attacks and defends as a unit, but I think in this match, because he tends to be the most central and most deep-lying of the 3 midfielders, we're going to see Tonali drop back a bit, almost mark Wirtz man-to-man as he floats between the defence and midfield lines. And Tonali is capable of fulfilling this role, because when we look at some of his stats in their opening match against Aston Villa, compared to the other midfielders, we can see that he really excels at this. His top speed was actually the highest of the 3 midfielders, and he seemed to be the most influential and the most rounded out of the 3 of them. And this energy that he was showing in the match, these raw stats in terms of distance covered and top speed, shows that he does have the ability to run around and track Wirtz. It might be a case of him getting subbed off after 60, 70 minutes because he simply just has expelled too much energy, but that's all right because Newcastle will have options on the bench, most likely Lewis Miley. But it won't just be a defensive shift for Sandro Tonali because he will still be influential in attack because he's very good at winning the ball deep in the pitch and playing long passes forward and still creating chances. Because when we compare him to the rest of Newcastle's midfield against Villa, what we can see here is that he was top for expected assists, top for passes into the final third, and still very high up with his progressive passes and shot creating actions, despite playing slightly further back than Bruno Guimaraes and Joe Linton. And this was most evident in the 6th minute against Villa when Anthony Elanga was sent through one-on-one. So if we take a quick look at this sketch of the chance, we can see that Dan Burn won the ball back just on the edge of his own penalty area, quickly shifts it to Tonali, who runs about 10 or 15 or so yards before playing that long through ball, which takes out Villa's entire defence and gets Elanga through on goal. Elanga sees a shot well saved in the end, but Tonali can't really do anything about Elanga not finishing the chance, can he? And when we look at the still images of that chance, you can see when Tonali is about to pass it here, he's got 5 Villa defenders in front of him, but he plays the pass anyway. Elanga manages to get through with a bit of luck and gets in on goal, 2 Villa defenders on the floor. And this is just an example of how Tonali can wipe out an entire defence with just one pass. His passing is that good. And why is this key for the match against Liverpool? Because Liverpool were very sloppy in possession against Bournemouth, and Wirtz was one of the biggest culprits. When we look at possession lost in that match, Wirtz was second. He gave the ball away 21 times. A lot of the time, this will just be Wirtz trying an ambitious pass or an ambitious cross, and it doesn't quite come off. But sometimes it could be giving the ball away, and if he does this against Newcastle and they can counter-attack quickly, Tonali can pick the ball up in midfield and play those passes that rip apart the entire defence and sets Newcastle's attackers on their way to create a chance or maybe even create a goal, because this style of play also plays perfectly into Newcastle's attackers. Liverpool's defence came under a lot of criticism on the opening night for their performance against Bournemouth, and Milos Kerkez and Ibrahima Konate seem to be the two who caught the most flack for their defensive performances. Kerkez, on his Premier League debut, seemed a bit rash with some of his challenges and got caught out of position a bit, whereas Konate just seemed a bit slow to react to the game and was also caught a bit too high up the pitch. And we saw this with one of Antoine Semenyo's early chances where the ball was crossed into the box and he may have put this chance over in the end, but you can see that he got ahead of Kerkez, who can do very little other than try and put Semenyo off his shot. And when we look at Bournemouth's first goal, we can see how vulnerable Liverpool can be when hit with a fast counter-attack. So as you can see here, just before the ball's played to David Brooks, Konate has already lost a couple yards on Brooks and he's not going to be able to make that up. Brooks then gets in and crosses to Semenyo, who you can see on the far side there, who's really got the jump on the left back. Here it's Andy Robertson because Kerkez had been subbed off at this point. But we saw Semenyo tormenting Kerkez a lot throughout the game anyway. And if Liverpool have problems dealing with Semenyo, they're going to have even more problems dealing with Newcastle's attack, who are absolutely rapid. We can take a look at the top speeds here between Liverpool's defenders and Newcastle's forwards in game week 1. And what you can see here is Gordon Elanga well clear of most of Liverpool's defence. And at first glance, you might think, oh, Liverpool got the top player there, though. They got Jeremy Frimpong, so that's all fine. But unfortunately for them, Frimpong is now injured until after the international break. And so we'll be missing the match against Newcastle and the key match against Arsenal next week as well. So this largely leaves Arne Slot with two options to play at right back. Either he goes for Joe Gomez, who's played 29 competitive minutes in 2025, or he goes for Wataru Endo, who has played 41 minutes at right back in his entire Liverpool career. Neither of them exactly scream title-winning options, because unfortunately for Liverpool, their backup right back, Conor Bradley, is also out injured. And so what we could see now is Anthony Gordon, who's expected to start in the middle of Newcastle's front three, could drift slightly leftwards to target Konate and Gomez or Endo or whoever's at right back for Liverpool, as this will be the most productive way of attack for Newcastle. Because Konate's got some serious defensive weaknesses, especially when you compare him to Van Dijk. He's quite error-prone and he miscontrols the ball a lot for a top centre-back. Furthermore, his tackling stats are quite average, even if you consider that he's playing for a top team, and so has to do a lot less defending than perhaps a lower league team might have to. Meanwhile, on the left side of defence, where Liverpool will have to deal with Anthony Elanga, who is one of the quickest players in the Premier League, they've got a choice between Kerkez or Andy Robertson. And I could see Slot going for Robertson in this match because he's slightly more disciplined and tends to play a bit further back, and Liverpool might need that defensive comfort. Because when we look at where Robertson and Kerkez like to pick up the ball, we can see that Robertson sticks to the middle third a little bit more than Kerkez does, whereas Kerkez likes to bomb forward into the attacking third. And this isn't a bad thing about Kerkez at all. It's just about choosing the right fullback for the right match, and Liverpool are in a fortunate position where they've got two high-quality fullbacks and can choose each fullback depending on the match situation. And this is why it could be preferable to play the more experienced, more disciplined Andy Robertson against Newcastle's rapid attack. But it's not all doom and gloom for Liverpool ahead of this match, because Newcastle have got a very frail defence, and unfortunately for them, the man who could torment them on Monday is a player who has been tormenting them all summer. So this time last month, Liverpool and Newcastle were battling over the signature of Hugo Ekitike, and Liverpool eventually won out, and he's made a fantastic start to life at Anfield. I made a video of how he fits into Liverpool's lineup last month, so please check that out if you want to find out more about Ekitike. And whilst Newcastle have had all sorts of striker drama in the transfer market, they've also got issues defensively, because when we look at their back five that lined up against Aston Villa, we can see that 4 of them are 33 or older, and a lot of them are quite error-prone as well. Pope, Schar and Burn really struggled with their errors last season. And Newcastle could struggle with depth as well, especially going into this match where their backup options are Sven Botman, who missed a lot of the season with injury, Lewis Hall, who also missed a lot of the season with injury, and Malik Diaw, who was only signed a couple of weeks ago and is still probably settling in. Liverpool, on the other hand, have got 4 very hungry attackers, 3 of them still very young, who are ready to exploit Newcastle's defence. Salah, Wirtz, Gakpo and Ekitike love to create chances, and we saw this on full display against Bournemouth, as you can see with their shot-creating actions, progressive passes and progressive carries in that match against Bournemouth. And whilst I covered how Tonali might be able to keep Wirtz on lockdown, and Livramento is more than talented enough to keep an eye on Salah and try and keep him quiet, Fabian Schar and Kieran Trippier might struggle to deal with Ekitike and Gakpo. And the battle between Ekitike and Schar could well decide the match. Because what we can see here is Shar's biggest weakness also happens to be Ekitike's biggest strength. Schar is one of the worst centre-backs in Europe's top 5 leagues for percentage of dribblers tackles, and his tackling stats in general tend to be quite weak compared to other centre-backs. Ekitike, on the other hand, loves to take on defenders. He loves to carry the ball forward and drive into the box. His style of play is definitely more dribbling rather than passing, getting the ball forward with his feet rather than playing passes through defensive lines, and this will be Shar's biggest nightmare, because when you combine this with Gakpo's style of play, where he likes to cut in on his right foot, run along the penalty area before trying to curl a shot into the bottom corner, Shar's going to have real trouble on Monday, because we saw Gakpo do this against Bournemouth and he'll be licking his lips thinking about doing it again to Newcastle. Trippier will need to lend a helping hand because Schar could easily get outnumbered, and I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool's tactic is to try and overload Schar, get Gakpo dribbling at him, get Ekitike dribbling at him, the other one can get freed up and then get some more space in the box, and Liverpool will try and create chances like this. Newcastle have a hell of a job to try and prevent this happening. But enough about all of the analysis, it's time for some predictions. So back in March, when the two sides last met, Liverpool came into the match on a 17-game, 10-year unbeaten streak, but Newcastle won out, crucially, to lift the Carabao Cup title. However, we can't neglect the fact that Newcastle's record against Liverpool in the Premier League has been woeful of late. And when you look at their last 5 meetings, we can see that Liverpool have had the upper hand more often than not. The Reds were even able to squeeze out a win in August 2023 at St James's Park, even though they were down to 10 men. But another trend that we can see across the last few matches is that lots of goals are scored. There have been 20 goals in the last 5 meetings, and given both sides' defensive frailties, don't be surprised to see another goal fest on Monday. So when you consider the weaknesses in attack and the strengths up top for both sides, I expect we're going to see a lot of goals. And so my prediction is that Liverpool will win this match 3-2. But what do you think? How do you think this match is going to pan out? Would the transfer drama of the summer make this match a bit more feisty than it normally is? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and give this video a like if you like what you see. Also, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and for some short form and behind the scenes content, please give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok. I'll see you next time.